Hey everyone, welcome to Resilience Unravelled. This podcast is a result of my fascination with subjects like resilience, accountability, burnout, life fulfillment and other life and work-based performance issues, as well as many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, people and organisations, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories and expertise, as well as my own synthesis of the key issues, strategies, tips, tools and resources to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, why not go over to our site qedod.com. Stay tuned to the end to find out details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So hi there, welcome to Resilience Unravelled. And today I'd like to welcome Helen Pollock, who's joining us. And Helen is a book coach who I happen to know very, very well because she's working with me at the moment on my own book. And I thought it'd be really brilliant, actually, to interview her and to talk to her today for those of you who are thinking they've got a book inside of you and you've always wanted to write it. And I'm sure Helen's going to be able to exchange some really interesting tools and techniques to get you started, but also will introduce you to the concept of a book coach and how that all works and such like. So, Helen, hi. How are you?
Hi, Russell. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Bearing up okay in these strange times.
It's a good test of our resilience, isn't it, to be able to actually to think about this and focus on something that's proactive, you know, and sometimes when people are finding it quite anxious as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, people are getting in touch with me. I have seen an increase in enquiries from people who are thinking of finally writing that book because they have now got bonus time because they're not commuting to work or traveling extensively. So, yeah, I think you're right there.
Okay. Well, why don't you start by telling us, in a nutshell, what is it you do?
So I help people to write their business or nonfiction book. And there are two ways that I do that. So the first one is as a ghostwriter. So I would write the book for them. And that might be because they don't have enough time, or it might be because they're not confident in their writing abilities, or they don't enjoy writing. That was I spoke to someone last night for whom that was the case. And then the other way, and this is how we met, is as a book coach. So that's where people want to write their own book, but they know that they need some help and support. So I provide structure, I help them to structure their book, and then that makes it much easier for them. It breaks things down into manageable chunks rather than, I don't know, looking like a Mount Everest in front of them. And then I also I provide them with the information they need to make the right decisions about their book. And finally, we have regular video calls where I can give them support and accountability.
Brilliant. So how did you get into this sort of line of work?
So I love writing and communicating in general. And I went into marketing and PR, and I was particularly interested in PR because, you know, you get paid for writing, and that just seemed like a dream come true for me. So although I've worked in every area of the marketing mix, my specialism really is PR. And so when my daughter was born, and she's 8 now, I set up my own business. And that was slightly randomly teaching Mandarin Chinese to primary school children.
Right.
And then I did that for about 5 years alongside a senior part-time PR role. And after 5 years, I had tweaked the business model of my teaching business every which way, and there just wasn't enough meat in the sandwich, so it wasn't profitable enough. So I'd learned a lot, and I'd never say I regret having started up and run that business. But I started my own PR consultancy a couple of years ago now, and very quickly a client who I'd known in a few different capacities for a couple of years asked me if I would be willing to ghostwrite his second book for him. So he was already an Amazon best-selling author in his sector, but he now just didn't have the time to write this second book he wanted to write. So I wrote that for him. That became an Amazon bestseller. I ghostwrote another book in the same sector for somebody else. And then people started approaching me saying, well, I actually want to write my own book, but I know I need some help. Would you be able to help me with that? And I thought, well, yes, I would actually. So that was how the book coaching came about.
And it's interesting. I was at a business network meeting quite recently, sitting next to someone who said, I'm just launching my new book, blah, blah, blah. And she was talking about it, and that she was there holding a physical copy in her hands. And she was talking to it was a business community. And she was talking to the business community about it. And she traveled around the world and written her story, and it was great. And you turned out to be the book coach. So, that's evidence to,
Yeah.
And I mean, we didn't know that. We knew this person in common actually when we were chatting, did we?
We did. That's right. So yeah.
So, there's often this phrase that everybody has a book in them. And is this true?
I think it is not. I think many people do have a book in them, but really it's about, do you have a compelling story to tell? So, you may do, you may not. And if you don't, then you probably don't have a book in you.
So when you're talking about a story, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's a different approach from, say, having, I don't know, so usually there's this idea you're educating, informing, or entertaining, isn't it? So you can write a non-fiction book in any of those things.
Yeah.
But, if you're informing or educating, do you need a story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any kind of writing where you're trying to influence people in some way, you're telling a story. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, people bang on about storytelling, don't they? As being,
They do.
From the time we all used to sit around and open fire together, blah 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 blah. But not everybody likes a story or can tell a story or wants to listen to a story. But you're sort of advocating this sort of storytelling approach.
I think just in terms of making things hang together well, that's what it is.
Right.
It's about constructing a coherent structure and helping people to understand the content that you're putting forward for them as easily as possible.
Right.
And so, that is going to be like telling a story. There's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you need to think about how you structure your content accordingly.
Interesting. He said, sounding doubtful. I just find that I mean, I get your thing about the beginning, middle, and end. And that's that makes a hell of a lot of sense. But one of the things that's going through my head is that you said you did ghostwriting. So let's tackle that bit first of all, because I know I'm most interested in book coaching, because I think people would be thinking about that. But just to cover off a ghost, how on earth do you do ghostwriting for someone who's doing something that's maybe extremely technical? That that you want to write a story about tort law or something, or Battenberg cake making in the 1430s. How on earth can you ghostwrite that story?
So I guess
you do realise I'm only thinking of Battenberg cake now, don't you?
Yeah. And that's not really the cake that you can just knock up at home quite so easily, is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I saw it on the Bake Off the other night. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it's not a I don't know, Victoria sandwich, is it?
No, true. Come on, then. So how does a ghostwriter get to grips with? I mean, I can see how you do it with fiction or with a biography, but how does a ghostwriter work with something that's a technical subject?
So it all depends on what the author's source materials are.
Right.
So very often, I actually work with podcasters. So they might have, a series of podcast transcripts that they want me to create chapters from. Or if people are training others in a particular topic, then they might have course or training materials, presentations, that sort of thing, that I can use as the basis. But if someone is starting from, with nothing, then it's interviews. It's, it would be 12 to 16 hours of interviews, not done in one go. There'd probably be a chunk at the beginning, and then there'd be interview, and I'd write a chapter, interview, I'd write a chapter, interview, I'd write a chapter, and that sort of thing, really. But, I think there are going to be subjects that only a specialist ghostwriter could tackle.
I see.
My, what I work on is, one of my specialist areas is property, for ghostwriting, but I'm speaking to a lot of people now who have interesting life stories to tell. And so that's going to be a new direction for me, which is a slightly more literary non-fiction.
Biographical.
But yes, and biographical non-fiction. But it's just really interesting because I'm someone who gets bored easily, and here I am able to, find out loads about lots of really interesting people and fascinating subjects.
Well, no doubt that you'll be writing a book about that in the future.
It's on the list.
Yeah,
maybe I need a book coach.
Yeah. So so let's say that someone has a book in them and they just want to make have a go at themselves, so they've got an idea in their head, they sit down, they open their computer, they turn to page 1 of Microsoft Word or Pages or whatever it is they're using. They write their title down, and then bosh, off they go, and the magic just flows from the ends of their fingertips. Is that it? Is that how it works?
No. Unfortunately, that is not how it works usually. So there are a lot of steps that you need to take before you can start writing, in my opinion. So the first one is an audit of your audience. So first of all, who is your ideal reader? Do you have an audience of those people already? And if you don't, then you need to start building one quick, smart, before you even start writing.
Right.
I would say, because it takes the average person 3 to 6 months to write a book.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a decent amount of time to be starting to build a decent audience. Because even if you're going for a traditional, if you're looking to publish your book with a traditional publisher, they will expect you to bring a significant audience to the table these days.
Right.
So that's job number 1. Job number 2 is to do your customer and competitor research, and to work out what your readers need you to tell them and how they want to be told that. So, what format? Is this an ebook? Is it a printed book? Is it an audio book, which is a big growth area for publishing now? And competitor research, have a look at other similar books, or at least books in the same sector. What did readers like about those books? And what didn't they like? And are there any opportunities for us there as an author? So there's plenty of things we need to do before we actually put pen to paper, or finger to laptop, more likely.
And that makes sense. And I can see most people sitting and thinking, yeah, that's very logical. But there'll be some people who are saying, do you know what? I'm going to self-publish. I don't care if there's an audience. I have a message and I want to put it out there. And my views on whatever it is So it becomes I forget the word. There's a phrase, isn't it, for a polemic? That's the word, isn't it? So I will put that out there, irrespective of the audience size or their needs or their wants, because sometimes the most groundbreaking work comes from, or the most individual voice comes from writing something where you've invented it from scratch without doing that sort of work. I mean, is there a space for that in the world?
Sure, of course there is. There are lots of different approaches for creating a book, but the majority of the people who come to me are not in that position. And they're thinking, I really want to write a book, but I just don't know where to start. It all feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's making me procrastinate and not do it. So that's the place, people are coming from when they approach me usually. And so I'm able to break things down into manageable chunks, give them a plan, and help them to structure their book. And once you've got your table of contents, which is I call your book skeleton, then it's a case of fleshing out that skeleton and adding words to the chapters, and you'll get it done. So yes, there is a place for that approach, but those aren't my people.
Very good. So
and that's fine.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because people ask me that, isn't it? There's this thing about writing for an audience or writing for yourself, and both are acceptable, aren't they? It just depends what and there's a difference between writing and having a reader, isn't there? Someone who's prepared to pay for the work that you put together. So if you want to create a commercial book, you've got to really do what you're talking about. And I often find that the polemical stance is great when you're actually writing an article, but it doesn't actually sustain itself for 60, 70,000 words. It can be quite a challenge, really.
Yeah.
Now it strikes me that writing a book is a great test of resilience. So you've already, created the first thing, which is procrastination. And if you think about resilience, being about building stamina and focus and such like, what advice do you have for people who do procrastinate, who do have a lack of focus? I mean, some people say that it's because they're not organized. Some people say they're not motivated enough. What's your stance on that?
So I think the most important thing when it comes to writing a book is when you've done all those preparatory tasks and you are ready to write, to schedule the time in. Schedule it in regularly, and make it so that you can't, book a call over the top of it or whatever it is. And even if it's just like, an hour a week, eventually you will get it done. And if you can make it, 2 hours a week or an hour every morning or a day a week, then you will get there far more quickly. So it's just that it is about scheduling it in, scheduling that time in, and trying to stick to it as much as possible.
It's that thing about priorities, isn't it? If it's important, you prioritize it above other things. But I know in my own work, becoming a doctor and, masters, academic achievements, you often find that people say, my house has never looked cleaner, my cupboards have never been more organized when I'm attempting to write a dissertation, because we spend a lot of time avoiding it, because it's extremely daunting, isn't it? And you can lose energy through the process. Now, I follow the work of Dan Pink a lot, and he says that you should do deep work in the morning, administrative tasks in the afternoon, and creative stuff in the evening. And I quite like that as an approach, because it sort of optimizes more. There's a sort of a brain energy pattern. And I don't know if when you've worked with people, if you found that a useful, is that a sort of a useful pattern that people could follow?
So that's really interesting, because for me, like, creative thinking is almost entirely absent in the evening.
We tend to chat,
which is
that explains so much.
I
Luckily, I'm having
but seriously, if I am, I would never start writing in the evening,
right? Good.
Because my brain is
tired.
Just I mean, I have got two fairly young children, and I am also, I don't mind don't mind telling your listeners this. I'm a lady of middle years, and I have found that is affecting my energy levels, and also my kind of brain fogginess in the evening is a bit of an issue. So I'm much better tackling things in the morning.
It is interesting because we're actually in our own practice doing some particular work around that particular subject at the moment, actually helping women around that particular problem. And that's because actually one of our own therapists has gone through it recently and has been so affected. She's been thinking about how to help people. And I definitely think there's a book in that area. But enough of my thousands of ideas. Let's concentrate on yours. So you're saying be organized, do the research, find your customers, be able to figure out what those customers want, look at the competition. And then you talked about having this table of content. So you build your structure and your skeleton, and then basically then starting to write. Or is there... So in other words, once you've got this skeleton organized, you said flesh it out. So how do we, in effect, flesh out the skeleton?
So if you've created your table of contents, your book skeleton, then because we'd have already worked on what readers will know when they pick your book up, and what you want them to know by the time they put your book down, and would have plotted out a journey effectively for your reader, and then we've created the table of contents from that. And because with business and nonfiction, we usually know what we're talking about, or in this case, writing about, it shouldn't be that hard. It's not like we're having to juggle, character development and, a complicated plot. We should be able to just then, start writing, follow the structure we've created, and what you're writing about, so it will just flow.
It should. That's that dreaded word, should, isn't it?
Should. But that's what I'm there for. Right. Is, when people... Yeah.
What happens to people with writer's block? Because we hear about that, and I think that's a test of resilience, where you keep looking at things and you just can't make it work. So how do you get around those sorts of things?
So, there've been times when I've been ghostwriting, or even just like writing features in my PR life, where I just haven't been able to find an angle for something. It's really doing my head in. And the solution is to take a break. Right. And there is a particular type of brain state. And so for me, as the mum of 2 young children, going for a run helps me to get into that state, or even sometimes going for a shower, right. Where it's I'm doing something, and it's kind of like mindfulness, really, isn't it? But very often I find myself coming up with solutions to problems, where if I'm running, or if I am in the shower, or during the meditation section of my half boxing, half yoga class that I usually go to, right. When I'm not supposed to be thinking about work at all. But I often come up with solutions to work problems in that time, the relaxation and meditation section at the end. So that's the try that, because that can be a quick win. Nip out for a run for half an hour or whatever. If you still can't get past it, then sleep on it for a night, a couple of nights, and you might find it comes to you. And then so other people have recommend doing something else that's creative but in a different way. So play some music, or paint a picture, and see if try accessing your creative mind but in a completely different way somehow stimulates a solution.
Yes, and I think psychologically all that works. But the thing to avoid is just banging your head against a wall and trying to push through, because actually that doesn't work so much. You really have to do this sort of peaks and troughs, don't you, to be able to re-energize and renew. I think that's so important, isn't it? That's the excuse I'm going to give you next time I talk to you on my own project. So there you go. I've just been pausing. I've been doing a lot of running. 2 stone 3, so fit. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So if you want to sit down and you want to write a book, do some research, figure out what you're doing, understand what the market's saying, that's all good stuff. Get yourself a table of contents, break it down, and then begin to hang subject on those sorts of different bits of the framework. That all makes a lot of sense. You're taking people on a journey. You're leaving with something they didn't have before, or reinforcing something, or whatever it might be. And then a whole different section is, of course, then about how you publish a book and how you market it and such like, which we don't really need to go into today. So where does a book coach particularly add value?
I think the thing that people say they appreciate the most is the support and accountability. The knowing that we're going to be talking in 2 weeks' time, and if you haven't completed your agreed tasks, you're going to need to to tell me that during our call. And I think also just having someone who you can fire off an email to about something that's bothering you, or something you need information about, and I can point you in the right direction. So I think it really does help people who otherwise would not be able to get their book written. It really does help them to do it, and to do it well, to make it the best book it can be.
And I would actually add on to that. It's about helping people with the things they didn't know. I think that's part of the problem, because I think it's about shortcutting, isn't it? Try this sort of works. And I think that's something we undervalue, because it's a long enough process without reinventing the wheel. And if you've got someone to help you skip 20 steps, then I think that's important, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, I mostly work with entrepreneurs, and I think sometimes we can be really bad as entrepreneurs at undervaluing our own time.
Yeah.
So yes, you would pay me to be your book coach, but think of all the your time that you'll save. Absolutely.
Very good. So people would there are lots of book coaches out there. I'm talking to you because I can actually personally vouch for you, and I always, whenever I'm talking about a specific thing, like to talk to the people who I actually physically know and can attest to their excellence and accountability capability. How would people get hold of you, Helen? How would they find you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if people want to connect with me, it's my personal profile on LinkedIn, Helen Pollock. Or on my website, which is www.thecontentdoc.com. And I'm going to be running my next free 5-day Get Unstuck with Your Book challenge in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So I will give you a link to that, Russell, that you can share with your listeners. So they can sign up for that if they want to really kick things off and get this book started, if they've been thinking about writing one for ages. And I'll also give you a link to my free ebook, I Just Don't Know Where to Start, which is aimed at first-time business or non-fiction authors who, as the title says, just don't know where to start.
Brilliant. And I guess not just knowing where to start, but sometimes that you've half written something as well, and you're thinking, shall I just throw this all away and start again? Because that's another thing that people get stuck with, isn't it?
It is. And so the person who we both know, she came to me and she'd already started writing. And I said to her at the time, I kind of designed this program for people who haven't started writing yet, and I'm not sure how we would adapt it for you. But she was happy to go ahead anyway. And actually, she said to me at the end, you absolutely can say to people that this works for people who have already started writing too. So that was really good to know. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. And for those of you who are wondering why we're sort of scooting through the material today, actually, we've had all sorts of connection issues, and Helen and I this must be our 87th attempt to run this podcast. So I'm tempting fate at the moment by hoping we can get to the end without the technology blowing up yet another time. So it's helen@thecontentdoc.com. It's at Helen Pollock on LinkedIn. And you've got some goodies and some downloads, and you've been a brilliant guest today. Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Russ. I really appreciate it, and it's been great to chat with you.
No problems. You take care. Thanks for listening today. You can go to our site qedod.com/podcasts and subscribe to hear other titles in our series. Or you can contact us at info@qedod.com to hear and find out more about tough love, leadership, accountability, resilience and burnout. You can go to our site qedod.com/burnout2019 to hear and get access to a load of resources to help you manage and fight burnout. And you can go to qedod.com/free ebook to hear more about the fundamentals of resilience. Until the next episode, keep on thriving.